Alright, so this is the first video that I'm making today, so apologize if it takes me a minute to find my voice. I just sang a song, but it may take me a minute. Anyways, again, sorry for the setup. This is as best as I can do right now, and I apologize for the poor condition that my hands look in. I do a lot of dishes at work, so just, I'm aware of that. Dry and all that, but okay, so this video is going to be about the wave spell, or the number 13, a cycle of 13, which can manifest itself in many different sizes, so for instance, this is primarily going to be about the night-day cycle, or the 24-hour cycle. So these each represent a day, or night-day, as you know, I've been known to call it. But that 13-day cycle is just a fractal of 13 harmonic cycle, or a 4-day cycle. They can be 13 weeks, or heptads. They can be 13 moons, and we're going to get into that, as well as 13 years, etc. So let's just get into it. So the 13, right? Let's just go through them, and then we'll get into details, etc. Sorry if the angle is crooked. There we go. So number 1, and these are the names that Jose Arguelles translated them to, right? From the previous Mayan science, which I believe they used the language of Yucatec, but it's older than that. Essentially, this science of the 13 manifests itself all over the world. So there's many different ways to look at each one, different names that you can call it, different translations. Sometimes I create synonyms to give them, a different kind of identity, but essentially we're just going to go through the names that Jose Arguelles translated these to, and then if another term pops up, I'll point that out. So the 13, the first one up here is the magnetic, right? The magnetic tone, the magnetic lunation, the magnetic moon, etc. So the magnetic is the first. It is the unity. It is the like looking at the big picture, looking at it overall as one unified thing, right? So if a wave spell, for instance, of the Tzolk'in began with, let's say, the first red dragon, so this would be red magnetic dragon, then this whole 13 sequence would have the purpose of the red dragon. And the qualities of the red dragon are birth, because it is the first. It represents primal creation. It represents the primal creator, which I also synonymize, I guess is a word, with the core. You can think of it as the all, right? The unity, right? And when that is paired with the red dragon, this thing has the whole quality of the red dragon. So it's about birth, nurturing, and being, primal creation, etc. So this gives the purpose of the 13 sequence, right? This gives the overall picture. Whereas if it began with white wind, for instance, Kin 222, this would be white magnetic wind, for instance. This would be the whole purpose of the wave spell is about communication. It's about spirit, voice, breath, etc. So this whole 13 night-day sequence would be all about those qualities. Practicing meditation. It would be about breathing. It would be about communication. It would be about spirit, etc. Listening for the messages coming down from the divine, etc. Or if, for instance, this had blue hand in its position, it'd be blue magnetic hand, then that would, or Kin 27, then the whole purpose of it would be about architecture, or by that I mean creation, like building things, putting things together, utilizing your hands to construct whatever it is that you're trying to build, as well as knowledge in and of itself, as well as healing and accomplishing things, because that is the purpose of the blue hand. So this, the magnetic, is all about the purpose of the 13. Now when you go into the number 2, this is lunar, or you can think of it as polar. Polar meaning dualistic, polarizing, polarity, etc. The lunar tone, yeah, sometimes it's confusing telling people about this because these are known as the lunar tones, right? They're qualities. They're not exactly symbols or signs like, what you think of as zodiac signs or archetypes. They're qualities or versions. They give qualities to the solar seals. The lunar is about opposition. It's about duality, right? It's about polarizing. It's about looking at things like they're mirrors. It provides the challenge because when you have one singular entity, then there's nothing to oppose it. Therefore, the essence or the energy would be all about that one thing. But once you add 2 into the mix, then you're going to have 2 separate ways of seeing things. Therefore, it's essentially providing the challenge of the whole wave spell, because it's showing the other side of it, so to speak. It's showing the how things split into 2 and how they're going to eventually reunify or transfer on to the next energy. So it's basically splitting the magnetic into 2 separate energy fields and providing the challenge, or providing the purpose of the reunification, how to bring things back into balance. And the electric, that's the third. That's when you have a dynamic principle. The electric is activation. It provides the first angle, the triangle, for instance. And when the electric is introduced, this is basically saying that these are the actions that have to take place. These are the services that must be provided. These are the things that we have to do. So for instance, when a wave spell begins, this shows the purpose, this shows the challenge, and this shows the thing that we have to do to overcome that challenge by the action, right? And then when we get into number 4, 3 also represents the mind. So in a sense, it's adding consciousness into the mix. Number 4 represents the square, which represents form. As soon as you get into the 4, you're adding matter or material into the mix. And so the self-existing represents the form in which the action is taking place, right? And so these first 4 establish the energy of the 13 cycle. As soon as the 4th is complete and you get into overtone, which is number 5, this shows the deeper meaning, so to speak, the nuances, because the first is connected to the 5. These act as the 4 towers or the 4 pillars. Once the first hits the 5th, then that purpose that was established in the magnetic tone is now deepened. There's deeper nuances to it. You can think of it as soon as you hit the number 5 and you hit the overtones or the undertones, right? Then you start to see all the many layers of it. You start to pick up on all the different entities that are basically split in many different ways, and all the things that they're communicating, all the energies that are being worked with, and it's basically starting to spread out and become more complex once you hit the number 5. So that is the overtone tone. That's also confusing, telling people about that. Is the lunar tone and the overtone lunar tone. And then once you get into 6, then the energy shifts, and now we're entering a separate field. So this is all about the activation. You can think of this as the red sequence. You remember of the harmonic? There's four sequences. There's 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So this is the establishing. This is the initiation, or the beginning of the wave spell. This shows the purpose, this shows the challenge, this shows the action, this shows the form of the action, and then this shows the deeper meaning of why, right? And then you get into the second sequence, which is extension, or the refinement process. And once you leave the 5 and enter 6, the 5 acts as like a combination of both the establishing and the extension. So 5 is also showing, how are we going to continue to go through this energy? What is the purpose of the deeper meanings? And once you get into 6, the rhythmic tone, the rhythmic lunar tone, then it shows how to organize and balance, so to speak. It's basically showing you, okay, these are the things that we're going to have to balance. These are the things that we're going to have to organize. These are the things that are currently chaotic. And then, and so we enter, every time a rhythmic tone comes around, you can feel it. You can feel that there's like this juggling process, like these spinning plates, and you got to go around and do all these different things. So whatever solar seal falls into that rhythmic tone is basically showing the thing that you have to juggle. So for instance, if it was rhythmic wizard, that means you got to you have to balance a lot of problem solving. You have to be the technician, and you have to juggle a lot of that. Or if it's blue eagle, you have to basically juggle looking around in space and understanding how space functions, and basically realizing the things that need to be fixed within our material world. Or if it were blue knight, you'd have to kind of go through your dreaming, and you have to go through your dreaming process. So 6 is basically like refinement, it's extending, etc. The entire rhythmic moon is the process of that. The 7th moon, or the 7th tone, this is super important. This is the resonant. And the reason why I say that is because if you've watched some of my previous videos or understand this principle, 7 is in the center of all 13, because you have 6 here, and 7 is perfectly in the center. The resonant is super important. It's basically the time where things start to, you basically get to the core of the entire 13 cycle process. And during that time, it's a very transformative process that basically changes things. Like this is like basically showing you the things that you're going to have to do in order to make things change. But this is where it really starts to change. The resonant it begins in a sense that you start to pick up on vibrations, right? The resonances, they start to come to you. But eventually, in the middle of it, if it's a day, it'd be the middle of the day. If it's a moon, it'd be the middle of the moon. If it's a week, it'd be the middle of the week. Once that hits, then you basically start resonating the changes that are taking place. It's not something that you have to do, like think of consciously, like in the rhythmic. It's something that happens to you, and all you can do is be with it. The resonant is the very center of the wave spell. So at that point, once it changes you in the center of whatever cycle it is, then afterwards, you just are basically being commanded. It's something that takes over you, and you just flow with it. And so this is a time of learning to trust the universe, because it is basically pulling your strings like a puppet master. So just remember that. And that's the moon we actually just left. So if that makes sense to you in some way, good. But once we enter the 8, it's a matter of galactic, because this was rhythmic, resonant, and the 8th is galactic. Basically, it represents the after effects of the changes that were made in the resonant, right? And it's basically a time of when karma comes back on us, whether we had integrity or not. If we were basically had no integrity and we weren't a good person, then that starts to come back on us. But if we suffered for the sake of helping others, or we had integrity where others didn't, then that integrity comes back. It's a very karmic sequence, right? The galactic karma, because it is the the 8 represents the whatchamacallit, the binding, right? It represents the fusing of the energy that has just taken place in the first 7 tones, and we start to see what was binded to us, in a sense. And so basically we're rewarded for whatever we've done in these first 7. And so once we're rewarded and we're justified, in a sense, then we enter the 9th, which is the solar tone, or the solar moon. And solar is basically saying, okay, now take stock of your intentions. Think about what you're pulsating, like dig deeper into why you're doing things. Because again, these 3 or these 4 are connected, right? It's basically saying, take stock of what you're thinking about, what you're intending. It's basically a time of reflection and looking at yourself and like kind of communicating with yourself and think like, what energy am I putting out? Now that I've seen what happened in the 8th tone, I have to now kind of like revise my intentions and realize what I'm pulsating and what I'm radiating, right? It's all solar energy. And then once we hit, and so basically it's like a preparation for the 10th tone. Now the 10th tone is key because the challenge and the service that was established in the lunar and the electric tones, right, is now, this is the time of challenge. This is when the challenge takes place. So these first 9 moons are to prepare you for the overall manifestation of actions that will have to take place in order to change things, right? That's why it's the planetary tone, because it is like the overall actions of all the different atoms of people all coalescing and working together to create change, right? It's the planetary whole, or the collective, right? And then once that occurs and we've overcome the challenge, depending on what we do, we enter the spectral. Oh yeah, by the way, like I said, this is the extension or the refinement, right? This is the transformative sequence. This is when the conversion happens. This is when the overall changes that have been set, established, refined, extended. This is where the sequence of it is basically starting to transform and change over. The spectral has the power of liberation. It's basically freeing you from the binds of the challenge in which we just overcame, right? It's sort of helping us to transcend or go beyond that which has plagued us, of the karma that we've had to go through, right? And the spectral is, if you think of the word spectral, not only does it relate to like the spectrum of light, like rainbows, like if you were to look at like a little quartz crystal and you see little rainbows in it, those are spectrals, right? Because they're of the spectrum. But specter also means ghost. So in a sense, this is when we basically start to commune with all the various different spirits of the planet, right? It's basically a release of since souls get stuck in certain like parts of the planet, and we have to change things in order to release those souls. Once those souls are released, then they become like free of their bonds. And so the spectral is basically a time of letting go of the ego to open yourself to essentially look at the world after it's like basically transformed. I don't know if that makes any sense. haven't thought much on the spectral tone, but it's a most mysterious tone, number 11. And I'll make a video on that later on. But once we hit the last portion of the transformative cycle, the crystal tone, crystal is basically when things crystallize. It's when all the energy that has taken place within the wave spell is like congealed or like reformed, right? It's a time when, for instance, all the souls or all the people, right, including the ones that, have gone beyond, whether they be of solar energy or spectral energy, etc., everything is like becoming crystallized. And this forms like a cooperation. Like essentially all the human beings that are alive are basically being coordinated together to work as one gigantic entity or one gigantic living form, right? And it's interesting when the crystal comes around, because you see a lot of people that just like are doing a lot of things for an ultimate goal, and they don't really understand why they're doing it. It's because they're being coordinated by the cosmos. And this is whenever things start to basically become crystallized and hardened to a point where you just have to kind of, let it be. And it's not always like good, because the things that humans have done can sometimes crystallize into things that are challenging, and it can make you struggle because the world that they've manifested, right? So the crystal tone is essentially the last part of the transformative cycle, and once you hit the cosmic cycle, or the cosmic tone, this is the ripening in a sense. It's basically preparing you to go to the next magnetic seal, right? So the 13 is the very last, and the 13 is essentially sort of the conclusion of the story. It requires no action on your part. Just like the crystal tone, you don't have to think of it consciously, right? It just sort of happens, right? But it's bringing things to completion. And a lot of times up until the very, very, very end of whatever the cycle is, if it's a day, sometimes it takes to the very end of the day in order to see the completion of the energies that's changed. Or if it's a moon, sometimes you have to get to the very end of the moon or lunation cycle to see what the conclusion is, right? And so a lot of times it can be very struggling, or you can be struggling, or it can be very difficult, be very painful. So the 13 is basically telling us to just be, to have presence, to transcend the ego, because things are coming to completion. Things are being orchestrated in a way that is beneficial for the good. So it's just a matter of enduring and having presence, and just to not get lost in the ego. And so once that generates the last issue, right, that hadn't gotten, like the things that did get changed, but the leftover karma is now built up to the next sequence, then that is transferred over to the next wave spell, or the next 13 cycle, and then it begins again. And this whole 13 sequence of 13 days, 13 weeks, 13 moons, 13 4-day cycles, harmonics, this sequence just repeats itself forever and ever and ever and ever in many different fractals, right? This is a universal matrix, a cosmic matrix that repeats itself throughout time. And if you become fluent in the number 13 and this wave spell sequence, as the Mayans were very attuned with, then you can start to see the patterns unfold, and you can start to kind of read them, or you can become in tune with them. That way you'll know the best course of action, whether it's time to take action, whether it's time to just be, or open yourself up to divine downloads, if you will. It's all a map of how to be. Because the 13 represents awareness. It represents wakefulness. It represents the light. Whereas the 9 represents the darkness, or sort of the void, in a sense. And then the 7 is sort of like the combination of the two. It represents the all and nothing. So this whole sequence can take an entire 364 days to get through, where you have to experience 28 days of each portion, and every 13 days we go through this, every 4-day sequences, right? So it takes 4 days to go through the magnetic harmonic, 4 days to go through the lunar, 4 days, etc., etc. It can take 13 weeks. Actually, each tropical season is made up of 13 weeks, right? 91 days. And I'll probably talk about that in a little bit because it's connected to this. So, yeah, just be aware of the maps that are, because it's different 13 sequences, different 13 cycles that are all interweaving together. So take, for instance, you can be in a resonant tone day, say if it's blue resonant monkey, or if it's white resonant wizard, or whatever, you know, and the energy for that day is of a resonant tone. But let's say you're in the electric moon, right? So it combines the combinations of both the resonant and the electric. You have 28 days of this, but only 1 day of this. And then the next day it'll be that, electric and galactic. Then the next day it'll be electric and solar. And then let's say the electric moon ends, and then boom, you're in self-existing and planetary, self-existing spectral. You see what I'm saying? So those are all interweaving to create these different fusions of energy, so you can basically just read it. You have to read it, and you have to become fluent in it in order to become more in tune with the cycles of nature. And this is very beneficial for both genders. One, so the woman can get in tune with her menstrual energy, which is emotional, which men feel that too. But instead of like cycling blood, it's cycling another fluid. Let's just say that, you know, like, well, semen. It's just, let's just say it. His seed, right? And that also coordinates his emotions, right? So that's just essentially how the structure and the qualities of each tone functions. So I guess I want to get into pulsars. So pulsars are basically how each tone interacts with the other tones, right? So you remember me saying how tone 1 magnetic, 5 overtone, 9 solar, 13 cosmic are all connected? These are the 4, right? Whereas the other ones are sets of 3. So within this structure of pulsars, they're all distant from each other by 4. So 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 4 is 9, plus 4 is 13. And this creates what Jose Arguelles talked about as the 4th dimensional time pulsar, because it is the only one that is constructed of 4. So it's 4th dimensional, right? So these all are connected when it comes to the purpose of time, in a sense. It's basically these 4 tones will all be of the same color in a wave spell. So say if this is red magnetic dragon, and this would be Kin 5, red overtone serpent, this would be Kin 9, red solar moon, and then this would be Kin 13, which is red cosmic skywalker. They're all of the same color, right? And so when you have them all of the same color, and as well as of these 4 of the same pulsar, they're all gonna basically have energy connected between them. Whereas 2, 6, and 10 are connected, and this one was described as the 1st dimensional life pulsar. This has to do with the field of biology and essentially what's going to be changing to us physically, as opposed to that which is all connected to time, or the beyond, in a sense. The 3, 7, and 11 are connected, and this has to do with senses. So it's basically the changes of life and how we perceive that in like our sensory field, just like how it reflects in our body, so to speak, right? And then the 4, 8, and 12 are connected to the mind, the third dimensional mind pulsar. So these are kind of the things that we're experiencing mentally. So these are the things that are affecting time. These are the things that are affecting the world and all the life forms. These are the things that are connecting our senses and what we're picking up and what we're feeling. And then these are the things that we're thinking about. So these, he basically called them just pulsars. They were the regular pulsars. They're just a distance of 4 from each other. So 1 plus 4 is 5, etc. 2 plus 4 is 6, plus 4 is 10. 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 4 is 11, and then 4, 8, and 12. So they all, in a wave spell, each pulsar set, they're all going to match the same color. So it's connecting the seals by color, and it's connecting them by distances of 4. You know, so it sort of like helps us to understand those things through the patterns of the 20 solar seals. Now, this is a different form of pulsar. This is what is known as the Overtone Pulsar. So I haven't mentioned this yet, but the Mayans, they sort of their numbering system, the way they numbered, or they had a they had a dot bar notation. So I don't think it's here, but the way that they wrote their numbers, the way that they wrote them was a dot equaled 1 and a bar equaled 5. So that's why the tones have these little dots and bars. So 1 would be 1 dot, 2 would be 2 dots, 3 would be 3, 4 would be 4 dots, and once you hit 5, then you have a bar, right? And then 6 would be a bar and a dot, 7 would be 2 dots, 1 bar, 3 dots, 1 bar, 4 dots, 1 bar, 2 bars. 11 would be 1 dot, 2 bars, 12 would be 2 dots, 2 bars, and 13 would be 3 dots and 2 bars, because it would be 5, 10, 13. So, sorry if I'm making this sound very elementary. You'd be surprised at how many times I've explained this to people, and they just don't seem to get it. So, I'm sorry. Or at least they're pretending not to get it. So, the Overtone Pulsars are essentially connecting the tones through the dot system, the dot bar system that they belong to. So every single one that is connected by having 1 dot in their in their 1 position, right, the very top, it would be 1, 6, and 11, because at the very top of each one they have 1 dot. So 1, 6, and 11 are connected. 2, 7, and 12 are connected because they all have 2 dots in their 1 position. And then 3, 8, and 13 are connected. 4 and 9 are connected, and then 5 and 10 are connected. These are unique. 4 and 9, 5 and 10. But essentially, if you actually look at each wave spell, they are connected in a very unique way. I'll make a video on the solar seals here in a little bit when I'm done with this, but I'll just kind of go over this real quickly for now. These are the Earth families, just to mention real quick. It's basically grouping 4 sets of seals of 5 each into a particular family. Hang on, let me look at this real quick. Sorry, it's this way. There's 5 Earth families made up of 4. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. So, essentially, seal 20, 5, 10, and 15 all belong to the polar Earth family, right? This is the bar family, if you will. These people like to be in large groups of people, right? Which is essentially one of the reasons why we've called a bar, because its older names weren't connected, but eventually when people in power learned about this, eventually that's a lot of the reasons why they name things is because of these secrets. Like if you remember me talking about the Wizard of Oz, sorry about the motorcycle in the background, I don't know why people got to be like that. Hopefully he just drives away instead of just revving it up in one spot. But these are all connected. The Earth families are all connected by distances of 5, right? And you'll notice that each Earth family represents a seal of every color. I'm not going to go too deep into this now because I'm going to mention it in the solar seal video I'm about to make. But it'd be 5, 10, 15, 20, you know. All, if you look at their dot bar notations, they're all made up of, in their one position would be a bar. And then you have red dragon, white world bridger, blue monkey, and yellow warrior. That's the cardinal Earth family because it'd be 1, 6, 11, and 16. You see what I'm saying? They have one dot in their one position at the very top. And then you have the core Earth family, which have 2 dots at the top. The signal Earth family, which have 3 dots at the top. And then you have the gateway family, which have 4 dots at the top. So this describes, these Earth families actually describe how we prefer to be in groups of people. Also specifically relationships. So bar family people, anybody who has a seal of the yellow sun, the red serpent, the white dog, and the blue eagle, they all like to be in large groups of people. These are the kinds of people that can be polygamous very easily. They like to have many different friends that they bounce back and forth between. You know what I mean? Whereas the cardinal Earth family, the 1 dots, they're loners. They ultimately prefer to be completely by themselves. Every time they get into a connection with somebody or relationship, it's not going to ultimately last forever, and eventually they're going to want to detach and go and be back by themselves. So anybody who's a red dragon, a white world bridger, blue monkey, and yellow warrior, these are loners, 1 dots. The core Earth family, the white wind, the blue hand, the yellow human, and the red earth, these are 2 dot Earth families. So they like to be with one other person. They prefer pairing up with one other person, and then that's what they primarily vibrate with. That's what they like. Basically monogamous. Like they like monogamy. And then you have the signal Earth family, which are the 3 dots. The blue knight, the yellow star, the red skywalker, and the white mirror. These are 3 dots. They prefer to be in triplets. They like to have 2 partners. They typically like to have a partner and their best friend just as equally in their life, and they can't decide one or the other. And eventually, when, you know, the time of awakening occurs, a lot of people in the signal Earth family are going to be in thruples or triplets. And then the 4 is essentially the same thing as 3, but they like 4 people. You know, they like 2 pairs in a sense, and that is the yellow seed, the red moon, the white wizard, and the blue storm. So I'm just going to mention that real quick because that's how the overtone pulsars are connected in a wave spell, right? And you'll see that 1, 6, and 11 all have 1 dot at the top. So